Hi, welcome to another episode of 6 Cents Out of a Nickel. If you're new to this channel, please introduce yourself in the comments below and tell me what you may like about this video or how you think I might be able to improve. I'm here to serve you. Thanks. Today I want to tackle why some people seem to have a problem with low-wage jobs and low-wage work. Some people look down their nose at those types of people and look down their nose at those types of jobs. It's important to note it wasn't always that way. If you look at the Amish and Mennonite society, those societies, hard work is encouraged. It's actually even it's idolized almost. They all have an incredible work ethic, at least most of them, and you don't find Amish or Mennonite people sitting in an office, like doing paperwork and stuff like that. It's just not the case. Everyone is out there doing something. It seems now, though, if you do something, you gather the ire from people, especially of the previous generations, who think that you should be above and beyond that. Where does this idea stem from? And where is it going? Okay, so as I said, back in 1800s, hard work was encouraged. If you could do a job with decent proficiency and you had a good work ethic, that was considered very much a plus. Where did that change? It changed with technology. As things got easier to do, a lot of those manual jobs got relegated to the machines. For example, my dad had he had a job threading pipes, which he had to take, rather large pipes and put them into a device, and then he had to hand thread them. All those threads that caused them to thread together, they all had to be grooved by hand, and that took a fair bit of strength and energy. Well, now they have machines that do that in a fraction of the time. So if you were still doing it by hand, it's like, well, what are you doing it by hand? They got machines to do that now. I think that's kind of where it all started. And as more and more machines were available to do the work that humans would do generally, tractors would replace horse and hand cart, to plow fields and to plant fields and to harvest. There's still some crops that need to be harvested by hand, but for the large part, there are machines that do a lot of the heavy lifting in our society. So now, what do we do with all that extra labor? All those extra hands that used to do the manual labor that machines now do. The natural progression would be, to manage the machines and manage the people that operate the machines. Relegate what machines go where, and what human capital goes where as well. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things machines can't do. They do make our lives easier, but there's certain things that really just need the human touch. And I'm sure some of those jobs will get absorbed eventually by machines, but some of them will always be around. There's some things that only humans can do, and that's not going away. But now they're looked down upon. They're looked as like starter jobs, because then the focus became go to school, get an education, and then you'll get a good job. Unfortunately, way too many people did that, and so now you have a supply and demand issue. Let's review why work is actually worth anything at all. It's never the job itself that gets paid for. It's the supply of the number of workers that are able to do that job. So if you have a pool of workers, let's say underwater welders, very few people can do that. It's not any more difficult per se as like land welding. There's a few different challenges and whatnot, but not many people can do underwater welding, so it commands a high wage. Other jobs like serving coffee, just about anyone can do. So there's a wide net of people who are capable of doing the job. So when there's a large workforce that's able to do the job and not as many jobs to fill with those people, you end up with an oversupply of workers, which means workers are a dime a dozen. You can basically pay them next to nothing, and they'll still flock to the job because it's a job. Any job is better than no job, right? Nowadays, with the inflation being what it is, I'm going to beg to differ, um, but that's the theory. I mean, and if you're a business owner, you're going to try and pay people as little as possible to do the work, so that your profits are as high as possible. That's just kind of the way business works. Unfortunately, they're not there really to look after the people like they should be, arguably. Um, but they're there to line their own pockets, and they line their own pockets by paying people as little as possible. And moving forward, a lot of people actually went to school. They got an education in whatever it is they wanted to do, and they found there weren't enough jobs in those fields in order to get secure a good job. So even if you went to school, you had too many people applying to too few jobs, which meant the wages were no longer high; they went down. So this whole go to school, get a good job thing, it was great when not many people went to school, and the wages were higher because there were fewer people competing for those jobs. But now there's like lots of people competing for those higher jobs, and the wages have just plummeted. So much so that now things have kind of gone the other way. Whereas you have all these educated people for these higher level jobs that no longer pay very much, but now you have nobody to actually work the hands-on jobs, particularly the trades like, plumbing and electrical and construction work and whatnot. Those jobs, they don't have enough people. So now the wages are going up in those types of jobs. It's interesting how that works. The whole supply and demand thing, it's actually amazing. It'd be best if we all had kind of like a balance between the number of people that could actually do the job and the number of jobs that we're trying to fill. But it never seems to really work that way. It's either too many people and too few jobs, or too many jobs and not enough people. This is where they're screaming for where there's a labor shortage. It isn't a full-on labor shortage across the board. People didn't suddenly just go missing. It just labor shortage in critical areas where we need to keep the society functioning. Now, a lot of people, especially from older generations, educated or not, they don't understand this whole supply and demand balance. So they're looking at the jobs themselves, and they look how they started, and they look from the perspective of their own experience. So in their own experience, you start off with a labor job, and then you went to school where there were very few people that were going to school with you, and you went and you got a job where there was very little competition, the wages were high, and everything's hunky-dory. And if you lived in that world, your perspective is going to be vastly different than what it is today coming up. Your perspective is, well, those jobs that you get the education for, they pay a lot, and you're going to look down on the people that actually have the physical labor jobs. And that's basically the basis of how those attitudes form in the first place, of what constitutes a good job, what constitutes a bad job. It's all a matter of perspective and how in demand your services are. Mike Rowe has a very interesting TED Talk, and I'll put the link in the description. It's a very interesting TED Talk where he says, we've declared a war on work. Work almost seems obsolete to some people, but there are people that actually have to do some of the jobs that make our society function. Some of the jobs that he refers to in this TED Talk are not only labor, but they're flat out disgusting. I mean, that's the whole point of the show that he hosted. He hosted a show called Dirty Jobs, where people are doing the most dirty, disgusting, the jobs no one wants to do, no matter how much they're paid, and goes through a day in the life of those types of people. And he makes some observations in that TED Talk that people that do physical labor are actually happier. Yeah, of course they're happier, because they're not spending X number of dollars a month on a gym membership, or they're not doing like Pilates, spin classes, none of that nonsense, because they get enough exercise and they get their daily dose of fresh air doing what they do in a day. And I think that's the thing that goes missing in the whole factor is how we're put together as people. We're not put together to sit and type on a computer and shuffle a few papers around. We're meant to move. Our bodies are meant to move around and actually do stuff, and that includes physical labor. My job at the hospital is very physical. It's part of the reason these videos are actually in a seated position most of the time, because I get a fair bit of exercise, and I do a very manual job. Get paid relatively decent for it. It's not minimum wage, but it's not way up in the clouds either. But anyway, enough about me. My point is we're meant to do both. We're meant to actually think and use our brains and think our way through things and manage and do the things that we do intellectually, but we're also meant to move around. So I think if we can find balances in our lives and in our personal and work lives regarding that, I think we'll be much, much happier people. And just as a final note, just think before if you're one of those people that has a tendency to look down on people who make a low wage or do physical labor, I just want you to take a moment as you're sitting in your SUV or your car or your van or whatever it is you're driving. You're in a vehicle. You're in the Tim Hortons drive-through. You're looking down on the people that are serving your coffee. I want you to think, why did you line up for coffee in the first place? And it's because generally, I'm just going to kind of like de facto answer here. It's probably because you thought it was worth your while, worth the money, worth your time to sit in that line and have someone bring the coffee to you. It's a service that you should value. Well, if you value it, why would you turn your nose up at the people that do that job? Just think about it for a moment. All the little things that people do that are physical labor, a lot of them aren't paid very well, and they're necessary to live the lives that you live. Why don't you value those people? I don't understand. Now, it's very few people that think that way. And to be fair, I think most of us appreciate when we get our coffee from Tim Hortons or whatever. I'm using Tim Hortons as an example. It's just an easy example to point out. Yeah, we might get a little upset when they get our coffee wrong. I've learned to drink coffee so many different ways because mistakes get made. And I don't want to be pooping and hollering at them because I'm sure they get enough of that. I think most of us appreciate the little things that make our lives easier, even though we may not take stock of all the things that that are around us that do make our lives easier. All the ways that people actually, they work a minimum wage job or a low paying job or even maybe an icky job, and it makes our lives work and allows us to have the comforts that we have. Coming from a place of appreciation really kind of helps that. I do want to tell you a quick story. I don't know if you're still watching, and it might change a perspective or two. Every year I used to get a fishing license. I haven't gone fishing in a number of years now, but I used to get a fishing license. And you could walk into like a Canadian Tire or a small fishing store, a bait store of any kind, in and out, 10 minutes tops, 15 if there's a lineup, and you'd have your fishing license. I would go to this guy that I knew. He had a bait shop. It would take him about hour and a half, 2 hours. I went to him because I really respected him. Here was a man who had cerebral palsy so bad he could barely move. It was an effort for him to walk. It was an effort for him to hold the pen. His hands were so uh, distorted. Uh, and he'd stop and he'd talk to you. He'd have conversations with you for, forever and a day. And you had to be prepared for that when you walked in the door. He'd have other people to help and whatnot. He never made very much money, obviously. If you're not getting the customers in the door, out the door, and like a revolving door, you're not going to make very much money. I went to him every year because I respected him. I respected the fact that, you know, he was out there, he was doing stuff. And he looked at me one day, and I said to him, like, well, why do you torture yourself with this? Like, you're in pretty rough shape. And he says, well, yeah, it gets worse all the time because it's progressive, right? The more he tries to maneuver, the worse his joints got, the worse his hands got. He was a little bit slower at things. He said to me, yeah, I'd be a shoe in for a disability pension, but that's not the life I want. I want to help people. I want to serve people. No, I don't make very much money. He said, I'd probably make more money on a disability pension. But here I'm useful. And I just totally respected that. So I went to him year after year. And anytime I needed, fishing supplies, if he didn't have it, he could order it in. It might take till the very next year in order to get some of the stuff, because he wasn't a big time supplier. But I respected that. And I think if we take the time to look at the people that do the things for us, that make our lives easier, make it more luxurious, all the things that we don't have to think about, I think we'll be happier. I think we'll have more appreciation for these people, and we'll have more appreciation for people in general. Just my perspective on it. Anyhow, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later. See you next time. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell for more content. Thank you very much. Until next time.